In the beginning was matter, and matter begot the amoeba. The amoeba begot the worm begot the fish. Fish begot the amphibian begot the reptile begot the lower mammal begot the lemur begot the monkey begot the man who imagined God. This is the history of the world. That's almost a verbatim quote from a man who, in a nutshell, defines atheism for us as the concept that there is nothing supernatural, that everything that is here is all that is here, as far as matter is all that there is and all that there was and all that there ever will be, and that you are the product of a multi-billion-year process of blind chance with no superintending mind behind it at all. Now there's another idea. I'm sure that you are fairly familiar with it as well. It goes something like this. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God hovered over the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God divided the light from the darkness, and the light He called day, the darkness He called night. An evening and a morning, day 1. Subsequently, day 2, God created the firmament. Day 3, He created the flowers, grass, and trees. Day 4, the sun, moon, and stars. Day 5, the birds and fish. Day 6, animals and man, ceasing His creative activity on day 7. Those are really your two ideas. Either there is a supernatural God or there is not. If you boil down all of the ideas from the beginning of human history till now as to origins and how we got here and what we're doing here, those two will come to the surface as the only two options. Either there is a God or there's not a God. Now, if you would have said, "Kyle, there's going to be a need one day for you to be delivering lectures and speeches and sermons on the topic of the existence of God," if you had told me that when I was 16, I would have probably laughed in your face. Because at 16, everybody that I was acquainted with understood that there was a God. When you got into a discussion, it had nothing to do whatsoever with, is there a God or not? It more had to do with, well, the Bible says over in Acts chapter 2, verse 38, this, and then the person you were talking to said, yeah, but over in Romans 10, 9 and 10 it says this, but then you went to Romans 6 and said, yeah, but that's because... That's how a religious discussion went. That's not how religious discussions go anymore. See, like I said, when I was 16, if you would have asked me, do I know someone who is an atheist? I would have said absolutely positively not. I didn't meet someone who was an atheist, someone who claimed that there is no God, until I was about 22 years old. I was speaking doing the summer camp at Maywood. The class that I had was the 15 through 18-year-olds 2 years ago, had 42 of them. I said, how many of you in here can tell me someone that you know who's an atheist? Out of the 42, 32 of them said they knew someone who was an atheist. I asked the same question this last year, so 2 years running I've asked the question. Had 40 this last year. Out of the 40, 30 of them said that they knew someone who was an atheist. Several of them, as I recall, volunteered that they had friends who were atheists. One of them came up to me after the class and said he thought he was one. In the last 15 years, it has gone from virtually no one in the youth group being able to even tell you the most famous atheist in the world to 75-80% of your youth group being in close contact with atheists on a regular basis. Now the reason for that, I think, is because if you were to run the numbers on the people in universities that are associated with the state, you would find that 80% of all professors in state-sponsored universities claim atheism. Now understand that that means 80% say, we know there is no God. That only leaves 20%, and out of the 20% that are left, there's probably a good 10% that say, we don't know if there's a God or not. The jury's still out. You'd be lucky probably to find 5 to 10% of professors in state universities that say that there is a God. When you send children off to schools and 80% of the professors that they're looking up to that are highly educated, credentialed, and very intelligent are explaining to them that there's no God and that is an outdated idea that needs to be put in the past and that they need to move forward with the idea that there's not a God and we need to work our society toward making it better based on the idea that there is no God. When 80% of the professors are telling your kids that's what needs to happen, what do you expect? One of my best friends in high school, grew up with him. He was at every youth function that we had ever done, just about. I hardly ever remember one where he was not there. He was on mission trips with us to the Bahamas. He was at every devotional. He would lead prayer. He would lead singing. Several years ago I heard, we'll call him Mark, one of our mutual friends said, "Kyle, you know Mark's an atheist." I said, "You've got to be kidding." He said, "No, claims atheism now." So I went home, got on the computer, went to my email. I had his email address. I emailed him and I said, "Mark, I've heard a terrible rumor. I know this can't be true. I knew you in high school. I knew all the things that you did. We had done mission work together." I said, "Our friend tells me you're an atheist. Is that true?" He said, "Yes, I'm an atheist because I don't think there's enough evidence for the existence of God." Let me tell you why a person never adopts atheism. It's never because there is not enough evidence or the evidence points toward atheism. Never. In fact, what I'm going to show you this evening is that if you are just going to follow the evidence where it leads, if that's all you want to do, if you want to know the truth and you're going to pursue the truth and you want to follow the evidence where it goes, there's only one conclusion at which you can arrive if you're honestly going to follow the evidence where it leads, and that conclusion is, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now, if you want to adopt atheism, if you want to believe that there is no God, you can if you'd like. God has empowered you with the ability to adopt or believe or accept things that are not backed by evidence, but you'll never adopt that idea based on the evidence. It'll always be something else. And in my experiences, what it has been is that people want to do something in their lives that God doesn't want them to do, and so they just jettison the idea of God so they can have their homosexual relationship, or jettison the idea of God so that they can continue to be addicted to alcohol, or get rid of the idea of God so they can keep living with their boyfriend or girlfriend. Most of the time what I have seen is that the adoption of atheism is because there's some type of sin in a person's life that they want to hold on to more than they want to hold on to the idea of God. Now, let's look at the evidence as it stands in relation to these two ideas. I mean, if we're just going to follow the evidence where it leads, I'm certainly not going to ask you to believe that there's a God because you've got a warm, fuzzy feeling in your heart that there is. That's not how the Christian faith works, and that's not how we've ever made decisions. God hasn't asked anyone to make decisions like that. In fact, the Bible explicitly explains to us that God has given us everything we need to come to the proper conclusion. There is an overwhelming abundance of evidence, and we're going to start just with the scientific evidence. We can look at this world and come to conclusions that are accurate and right about God. That's what Paul said in Romans chapter 1 verse 20 when he said, "For since the beginning of creation, God's invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by" what? By the things which are made, even His eternal power and Godhead. Now what we're going to start with is just to look at some of the basic scientific laws. You guys are scientists, even though you might not know that you are in one shape, form, or fashion, in that you use the basic scientific laws all the time. One of them, the most basic scientific law, is the law of cause and effect. Now, before we get into the law of cause and effect, we're going to have to analyze that idea of a scientific law. If I were to ask you what is the difference between a scientific law and, let's say, a law that legislators make, well, you would probably be very understanding and be able to explain to me that the difference is legislators vote on laws and that's how they get made, but scientific laws are not created by scientists. They're not made up by smart people. A scientific law is something